Thank you. We are in our closing panel for the summit. Can we just give it up for the whole day? We started Black here. Oh my gosh, excellent. We had a DOJ report. Then we had Battle of the Black Mind, and now we're closing out on a panel on reparative justice with a focus on music and activism as the intersection. We are fortunate to have the managing editor of the Black Wall Street Times, Dion Osborne, here to be our moderator. You might notice I'm wearing a Prince shirt. He's originally from Minneapolis, so it all happens the way it's supposed to, Next to Dion, our great facilitator and moderator, are two brothers that I feel really grateful to have intersected with in this life and also in the work that we all do. First, we have Dr. David Johns. Dr. Johns is the CEO and president of the National Black Justice Collective. You'll hear that CEO and president a couple of times on this panel because we're dealing with the CEO wing of everything in this work. But most importantly, there are many accolades that Dr. Johns has, but I affectionately am calling for at least a year, Dr. Closer, because he was announced at the top of the year as one of Time's 16 disruptors and closers. Our dear sister Ivy McGregor gives her sorrows for not being able to be here. She is dealing with an urgent personal matter. I just ask that we all uplift her in prayer. She really was looking forward to being here, and I'm sure we will see her in future Legacy Fest experiences. Lastly, but certainly never leastly, the one and only Prophet. Let's give it up for Prophet. Prophet is the CEO and president of the Black Music Action Coalition, which inaugurated itself when the Black music industry stopped the music industry upon the preventable death of Mr. George Floyd. Prophet, actually, you can find a video of him that goes back several decades. So when he was a teenager on MTV as a young activist being featured by Kurt Loder. I don't know if you remember me. I used to watch it every 22 minutes after the hour with Kurt Loder. And he was a whole feature segment. And so fast forward, just seeing him in his purpose and doing things on purpose for our people has just been one of the great witnessing experiences I've had in my life. Among his many honors is being named by Billboard as one of the lead executives and people to know in the music industry, and also Associated Press, Time Magazine, Variety, Hollywood Reporter. We could just go down a list, but in all of the occasions, he is always talking about the intersection of music and activism and how music is both our educator, but also our liberator. Can we give it up for our wonderful panel?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I know y'all had a long, long day. Okay, but we need y'all to turn up.
That's right.
Energy to be here for
That's
us.
right.
We're trying to have a real conversation, y'all. So all day, we've talked about reparations, what it is, where we've gone, and what the state, local, and federal levels have not done. But now we want to talk about what we are doing ourselves to bring it into fruition. So I guess my first question is, when you think of reparative justice in the lens of the work that you do, work that you both do, I would like you each to, in your own words, define what reparative justice means to you and how you apply it in your work.
You go first. Okay. I'll start. So, like Dr. Marcus said earlier, Black Music Action Coalition started in 2020. The greatest call for racial justice this nation ever experienced. The music industry created a movement called The Show Must Be Paused. And in that movement, 200 of the most influential lawyers, producers, music managers, artists, agents, formed a movement that will hold our industry accountable to the pledges that they were making around social and racial justice. You heard people pledging $10 million, $20 million, $50 million, you get a car, you get a car. And the reality is that what we have heard is that over and over again as a people. So we knew if there wasn't a movement that will hold them accountable, when the news cycle shifts that energy and that attention will also shift. So in this movement, what we would have been able to do is really bring the issue of social and racial justice to the forefront in a way that this industry hadn't experienced it before. Reparative justice, reparations in music, what does that mean? This is an industry that has been built on the backs of Black pain, Black resilience, and Black creativity. And there are generations of people who have reaped the financial benefit of that, and they're not Black folk. There's no reason why the great-grandchildren of some of the most prolific artists in the world are living in poverty, while their royalties and their publishing is providing a lavish lifestyle for grandchildren of folks who had nothing to do with it. So for us, until we get that straight, it all is performative to us. So one of the things that we're doing this year is we are launching a report, because the data is king. We can sit here and be emotional about it. We can sit here and raise our voices and shed our tears about it. But unless you have the black and white, like that irrefutable 9 minutes of the killing of George Floyd, that irrefutable evidence of what we're talking about, folks miss it. So there's a report that we're going to be releasing in the next couple months that shows the amount of wealth ripped from Black America through copyright and publishing. And the number is staggering. And it is the direct connection to the wealth gap in this country. A complete industry was created by us that we don't reap the benefits from. So we are working in a real way. And once we release that report, there's going to be calls to action. There's going to be lawsuits. There's going to be copyright laws that we ask them to change. There's going to be publishing that we ask them to be restored back to artists to help repair some of that. So that's what it means to me, and that's what we're doing about it.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, shout out to Prophet for jumping first in the double Dutch ropes. So y'all should know I entered this conversation as an educator. Are there any educators in the room? Thank you to y'all for doing God's work.
That's right.
Sincerely, hope y'all can appreciate that. Let me start by naming something that Tony K. Bambara said, which is that the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And a part of my job is to connect dots between things that would otherwise be suggested as separate and distinct. When I think about the importance of being in spaces like this, disrupting these binaries is really important, because too often people can think to themselves that the work of advocacy is somebody else's responsibility, right? That if I'm a creator, if I'm a singer, if I'm a comedian like Bell, then it's not my job to get active. And I want to submit to you, beloveds, that that is the exact opposite of what is true.
That's right.
Each of us have a role to play in honoring what Bell Hooks, lowercase b, lowercase h, because she wanted us to focus on the work, said, which is that each of us has to appreciate that democracies have to be defended by each generation, and education is its midwife, it being democracy defense. And so what I know is that it's really important. I got three things as a son of a Black Baptist preacher from Austin, Texas. I think in threes. The first is that a part of reparative justice is to tell the fucking truth.
That's right. That's
right? A part of what, a thread through every conversation that I'm appreciative for hearing today is the importance of telling the truth, in spite of what the federal government might say, in spite of what local people who are committed to hoarding resources might say. It is incumbent upon us to tell the truth, if only because in part Toni Morrison says that words are things. They get onto you and into you. And so a part of my work is to correct the record. It's to say things that's gonna make people uncomfortable. It's to do what Dr. Manny Marable taught us at Columbia, which is to speak full truth to power, especially when it shakes your soul.
That's right.
That's number one. The second thing is around requiring repair for harm. Something that I learned early on from my first educator and activist, my mama, is the importance of fairness. Like the idea that I can see injustice be inflicted upon someone, especially a child, who often don't consent to the politics that affect their lives in intimate ways, pisses me the fuck off.
That's right.
And so part of what I think is required after telling the truth is to engage in processes to address the harm, right? This is where one part of reparations gets bastardized by folks who want to reduce it to a check. Compensation is important, but also how are you paying into addressing the wholeness and wellness that I need in order to show up and not just survive, but to thrive. And so the second part of that is ensuring that there's comprehensive and full reparative justice, as Dreesen would say. The third thing for me is highlighting the importance of intersectionality. So in this moment, I just want to name that there are a lot of people doing the work of the devil in this moment. One of them is the failed history teacher turned governor of Florida, Ronald Dion DeSantis, who is passing laws to literally say that we should stop being woke, that we should stop saying gay and trans and black and things that we know, if we are allowed to name our conditions, we can then change them. A part of what's happened in this war on DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, which is really an attack on blackness, if we want to be more precise about it, is that we have forgotten the importance of intersectionality. Some people think and are giving credit to Kimberly Crenshaw around that principle. She contributed to it, but I'm talking about intersectionality as outlined by Patricia Hill Collins, who says to us that as a centuries-year-old practice of thinking about power and relationships, how we can then shift shit. And what I need all of us to appreciate is that the math such that if we all work together, we wouldn't have to deal with these conditions that we keep talking about are keeping us from being able to manifest in our fullness. And in particular, I need y'all to know that I'm the black queer person in this space that's designed to make some of y'all uncomfortable because some of y'all don't even like it when I say gay. Some of y'all might be clapping right now, but don't actually want to hold space for people who are trans, are gender expansive, and diverse. And I know two things to land this point in this moment, which is that none of us are free unless and until all of us are free. That's not a Dr. David Johns thing. That's a Fannie Lou Hamer thing. And what I know is that they, the powers that be, need us to be divided. They need us to be fighting against one another so that we are distracted from doing the work of defending democracies. And so it's really important for me as a natural disruptor, the one who's going to do all of the things because we have been anointed in a particular way to get us all closer to freedom to say the things that y'all don't want to say. That for me is how I show up in this space, knowing that while the term might not have always existed for me, that understanding and demanding all that we are owed is fundamental to how I show up in this world and has everything to do with all of the work that comes out of me.
That's the doctor. That was heavy.
Prophet, we were talking a little bit before the panel about this, and when you think about the music industry right now, we talked a little bit about this expectation that people sometimes have when they reach a certain level, or an expectation that we have for people when they reach a certain level in the music industry. You're supposed to give back. You're supposed to, be about our best interests, our collective interests. You're supposed to give back to the community you came from, right? I'm curious to know how in the world you go about changing mindsets in an industry that is so dependent on a capitalist, mindset, to insert reparative justice when it comes to artists who are just trying to come up, managers who are trying to, keep what they have and grow what they have. How do you insert something, as revolutionary as reparative justice in a capitalist industry?
Yeah, good question.
Great question. That we haven't quite figured out the complete answer to yet. But if history is a teacher, artists have always played an intricate role in the movements of advancing the democracy in this country.
Yeah.
Harry Belafonte almost single-handedly financed the civil rights movement. I was watching Selma on the plane coming here, and he chartered the jet for Sammy Davis Jr. and the others to get on there to come to that march across the bridge.
Edmund Pettus.
And it helped me, remember and realize that there is a disconnect. There is a disconnect between the current state of music and artists with the movement of justice. And part of my role and part of the role of the organization that we represent is to connect those dots. Because artists 1000% have a responsibility. You have a legacy that you're walking in that you have to carry out. And I will tell you this, It's the conversations that we have had with artists, managers. People are looking for leadership. People are ready. There are a lot more people who are willing than not willing, but there hasn't really been a collective movement that they can plug into. So that's why we take our work so important, because we look to be that beacon for artists and that beacon for the industry, so that they can plug into that and understand which way and how to use their platform to impact the society in a real way. But there's no question about whether they have the responsibility. They do, and we have to hold them accountable to that for sure.
So, Dr. Johns, you kind of mentioned it already. You beat me to it. But when we talk about intersectionality, I'm a queer Black man myself, and I've had my own journey of accepting myself, and how much of myself do I bring into a particular space, right? Especially when you're in the context of trying to inspire action in terms of justice. When we think of people like Bayard Rustin, James Baldwin, queerness has always been a part of Black liberation.
Yep.
So I guess my question is, how do we reverse this system of leaving out Black LGBTQIA people who are part of the movement, who have in many ways launched the movement?
Yeah, I love this question. I'm gonna take my time with it.
Please.
So 3 things. One is I want to say thank you to you for inviting us in. So I want to be clear. Words matter a lot to me. One of my majors was English, and so I use a phrase, inviting in. Y'all say it with me, inviting in. Inviting in. I use that because coming out is like nails on a chalkboard for me. Coming out is something that straight people expect of queer people. Y'all feel entitled to know information about us that you can't produce. Straight people will say, well, when did you know? Shit, when did you know? How did you know? Well, how did you know? Right? And it, again, usually around days like National Coming Out Day, there's this power imbalance where people feel like queer folks are at the lowest rung of the quality of life ladder and all of your sins don't matter. And so what I know is that you are not entitled to anything that I have or possess, especially if it will make me vulnerable to harm. And so I celebrate that you do not have to do that in disclosing that you are a queer person, but you trust me and us enough to do that. So I want to celebrate you for inviting us in. That's one. The second is, if I can push on language again, the pen that I have on is Bayard Rustin. And I know that it's spelled like Bay, B-A-Y-A-R-D, but when you think about his name, just think bisexual. It's Bayard Rustin, not Bayard Rustin. And he is someone who lives with me because it was his grandmother's Quaker orientation around celebrating our shared humanity that allowed him to be the organizer that he is. And I don't want to assume that we all know about Brother Bayard. I submit to you 3 things. One, we would not have nonviolent civil protests as we know it if it were not for Brother Bayard. We just wouldn't. It's something that he learned, he studied, he spent time studying with monks, including the Dalai Lama, and he brought those practices here. People like our sibling, Tamika Mallory, who has a brilliant book over there, have perfected it. That's one. 2, we would not have the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom that man produced in 8 weeks, including in spite of some Black folks trying to tear that down. And that was a stage where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was able to tell us about the dream. Beyond just that, Mahalia said, tell him about the dream. Beyond producing the literal stage that so many of our civil rights heroes and sheroes and theyros stood upon or helped to contribute to, he was a chief confidant, speechwriter, strategist, godfather to those kids. We would not have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in the way in which you did if it were not for Brother Bayard. I want to be clear about that. And I said I was going to take my time with this because the beauty in the question is that I just need to remind folks that unless you appreciate that my queerness is African, then you're not really talking Black shit. For Black folks who think that Black folks have always been cisgendered and heterosexual, that's a lie from the pit of white mediocrity. I submit to you two things. One is I proposed to my fiance, who I know our ancestors sent to me in a part of this country where there are no gender pronouns. Where there are no gender pronouns. There are places now where there are no gender pronouns, he, she. Those things don't exist. And many of us respect that our Native and Indigenous siblings have not only those practices and the sacred space for transgender expansive folks, but they also have words. What I know is that everything began in Africa. Every fucking thing began in Africa. It didn't just skip us. It didn't just skip us. And so we can appreciate that the invention of terms like woman and man were created to give some power at the cost of denying it of others. If we can just do the math of remembering how things came into being, we can appreciate that everything is African, which means that my queerness is African. Such that if you were talking about Black people being free and those Black people only look like you, then you're actually not talking about freedom. You're not talking about freedom. All of this for me is reflected in a beautiful book written by Sambufu Some. It's called The Spirit of Intimacy. It's a reminder that we thrive in community. In this moment, fascism wants us to retreat. They don't want us to be in spaces like this that are intergenerational, that are multicultural. They want us to be suspect of one another, asking who the fuck did you vote for in this moment? But that's how they win. That's how they get to continue hoarding power. What Sambufu says is in chapter 13 of the book, it's titled Homosexuality to the Gatekeepers. They write, in my village in West Africa, the words lesbian and gay did not exist, but the word gatekeeper did. More importantly, they say gatekeepers hold a special place between the village, the community, and our ancestors. You don't get to freedom without going to us. It's why the stage for the March on Washington was built by a queer man, homosexual at the time. It's why tomorrow we start Pride Month, which would not happen if it were not for Marsha Pay and No Mind Johnson. It's why you saw so much money being flooded into anti-trans attacks, knowing that that kind of division is sexy for folks who are ignorant and uninformed. But we don't get to freedom unless we do it together, and we don't get there unless we reclaim African ways of being. Queerness is an African way of being.
You don't get some comments for that one.
I don't give a fuck.
So
all the ways of being is African.
It is. And the reality is, people can say what they want, but the facts are what they are. I can point to the places where language has been a problem. For anybody that's confused about why I even offered up gender terms, ask yourself, why is there only one way to refer to a grown boy? He becomes a mister. There's at least 3 ways to refer to a grown girl. Miss, M-I-S-S, Miss M-S, Miss M-R-S. Those aren't just distinctions without a difference. Your relationship to, in this country, and this is all this is all European, right? But before European introduction of gender connected to marital status, and throughout most of the continent of Africa, women were entitled to property from their father and their mother. That shit shifted in Europe. Now you only get access to property if you marry a fucking man, and the marriage is sanctioned by the state. That's intentional. It's designed to give some access to power and at the cost of others. And if we can just interrogate why these words came into being, how they're legislated. This also takes me into the gender affirming care versus healthcare. I get pissed off when people are like, we shouldn't be paying for gender affirming care. Do you know anybody that's had a breast reduction or implant? You know somebody on Cialis? A nose job? All of that stuff is gender affirming care, but when we are not thoughtful, when we are ignorant in the pure sense, when we just don't know, and we're fearful, so we don't ask questions, because we don't want to be seen as ignorant, we get used, and we get used often to our own detriment and against one another. We shouldn't be used like that, beloved.
I mean, the problem,
Don't be used.
it all comes down from white supremacy.
Mediocrity, I want to, less words matter, and most of those niggas are mediocre at best.
White mediocrity. Wow. But the solution, when we say Black Lives Matter, it's really simple. All Black Lives Matter. That's what it comes down to.
Yeah, Mama wants us to let the record show that the first person to use the hashtag Black Lives Matter is Dr. Marcus Anthony Hunter. And in so doing, he was being a portal for so many of our ancestors to remind us that not only do we have to stay in the struggle in the moments in which our lives are contested or stolen, but we also have to be in this so that we can experience joy, including in spaces like this.
Self-determination, but also self-love.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we talk about how we get these messages to our people in a way that it's digested and it transforms our understanding, I want to talk to y'all about the role Black media plays in the movement, okay? So historically, Black media has been the anchor of democracy in a country that has always claimed to be so on paper, because we would set the record straight when they would lie. And so what I want to know is how do you use Black media in your work, and what do you think Black media is not doing well enough in this moment? Look, lay it on me. Lay it on me.
Not Diddy.
I'm saying that's prevalent. He said I'm not on film.
There you are.
It's a communal conversation.
I will say this.
What are they not doing?
I think that the internet has taken the place has become the centralized place where many of us get our information.
Absolutely.
So, and I had this conversation with a bunch of Black journalists that represent Black publications that are hemorrhaging because the ad dollars aren't going there to keep them alive, because the ad spends on TikTok, on YouTube, on the internet type podcast type mediums. We have to do better as a people of supporting Black media. We have to be intentional about it. There aren't many Black-owned publications still around. The ones that are, we have to double down and pour into. We have to advertise with so that they can keep their lights on. But the role of Black media has always been similar to the role of Black artists, have been that place where we can get the information delivered to us in ways that, not only we understand, but was truthful. But we are living in a time where the internet has suffocated that idea. And which is why it's so easy, as Dr. John talked about, being used, if you will.
Yeah.
Because one viral moment can send a whole generation into a path of destruction. So we have to get a better grip on that, for sure.
Thank you.
If I could add three quick things. One is that many of us in this room are Black media. Each of us have computers in our bags that we spend a shit ton of money on to not use most of the apps, but we have the ability to create stories, to talk about the things that matter, to amplify what's happening in this moment, and I don't want us to forget that. That's one. The second thing is I want to acknowledge the question, which was the second part of the question, as I recall it, is like, what is Black media not doing right? I'm not going to answer that question. The onus of what is being wrong rests with mainstream media. It's not Black journalists. So I want to separate the two. I said one is we are all Black media, and those who are not Black, hey, white people, you can pass the mic, right? You can use your platforms to elevate the voice of somebody who people in your network or community might not otherwise have access to. The second part of this is that so many Black journalists in this moment, I want to celebrate for being committed to the craft, right? Everybody who has a podcast or a microphone is not a journalist.
That's right. That's right.
It's a trade. It comes with ethics and practices that too many people don't have. And I want to celebrate that in spite of some of the games that mainstream media continues to play around capitalism and some of the other threads we're talking about, people are still trying to do the work. So in this moment, if you're not following Joy-Ann Reid,
Right.
She has a new podcast that is coming out, being produced by Byron Allen and the Griot. She frequently will engage in conversations with Don Lemon, right? So I want to talk about folks who are collaborating. There's Angela, Tiffany, and Andrew have Native Land Pod, right? Like there are folks who are doing the work in spite of the games that white people play, especially at corporations. And so in this moment, I just want to name that, I don't have to get too messy, but there are two mainstream media organizations. One of them keeps playing with Black folks very publicly. And I think that that's actually the challenge, is that too often we are placed in situations where capitalism compels us to fight each other over crumbs rather than banding together and demanding the whole goddamn thing. And so I am in this moment trying to do two things, which is to celebrate people who continue to be industrious and entrepreneurs, whether that's Roland Martin or the people that I've named or other people. There's some younger journalists in this space. But us continuing to work better together to push against some of the conditions that white mediocrity enables, I think will help us to get over the hurdle. The last thing is, I said 3, but this is 3.5, which is that we just need to teach more around critical literacy in terms of media consumption. Especially in a world where folks like Mark Zuckerberg have backed away from controls around disinformation and misinformation. It's even more important for us to do that work for each other and for younger folks who don't have those skills to know how to fact check or otherwise check to see if something has veracity or understands the importance of citing a source. So I hope I didn't answer the second question by design, but hope that is helpful.
I'm glad you answered it the way you did. I appreciate it. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because it's so frustrating as a Black journalist, especially sometimes when we go into our own communities, trying to talk to people and seeing where they're at and realizing that a lot of times people trust an influencer on a podcast more than the facts laid out in a news article, because they trust that personality. And that's really where journalism is heading. You know, you have personalities that people are navigating towards as opposed to actual outlets. And so I agree. I think that we do feel an important role, but it still is our responsibility to make sure that we're, you know, when it comes to the literacy side of media, that we're helping our communities to understand what's going on so they can understand how to decipher it.
Yeah, to this point, one more thing. You asked Prophet a question about how within the industry they're overcoming these capitalist problems. This makes me think about a connection, which is that all of us should consider membership in NABJ, the National Association of Black Journalists. A part of what I think sometimes we fail to do in spaces like this is to find homes where we're organizing and growing. So if you have not considered becoming a member of BMAC, go to blackmusiccoalition.org and sign up. And develop a culture of philanthropy such that we are not always reliant upon white people and their benevolence, such that we can fund our own liberation. And you also have access to a community where you can grow. You can increase your competence. You can find access to other things that you didn't know. And there's also safety in numbers. And so in this moment, as we're talking about journalists, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to plug NABJ or BMAC or NBJC.
So I want to take us to some more kind of action steps. For folks in the room, it could be, you know, artists, journalists, philanthropists, and just community members of all walks of life. What's one concrete action that we can take home today to support reparative justice and increasing and expanding intersectionality in our work? And either of you can answer.
My answer is going to be brief, and it's really going to be what Dr. John just said in terms of plugging into organizations that are doing the work so that you can have safety in numbers, get the information you need, understand how to mobilize, how to organize, how to actually take ideas and turn them into movements. You know, we spend a lot of time contemplating the issue, talking about the issue. The action part gets very tricky sometimes. We were very intentional. Doctor talked about being a wordsmith, or being words matter rather. The Black Music Action Coalition, that action was a very important word to us in developing the organization, because we did not want to just be a place where we just talked about the many issues that exist in the industry. But there were some concrete things we were doing to address those things and telling you how you can also address those things. So signing up to organizations like ours, organizations like what this brother is building. And first of all, you know, I don't know about you all, but if you all here, if you're a singer, right, and you hear someone hitting the high notes or hitting a deep baritone, it just does something to you. And if you're in the business of seeking truth and knowledge, when you hear it, it does something to you. So this brother's off the chain right now. I don't know if you all really understand what's happening, but I'm sitting in this chair like, damn. You know, we have never shared space like this before. And I'm sitting here saying, this dude is incredible. So you just give him another round of applause. So follow him on IG. Follow him on social platforms. Follow Dr. Marcus Anthony Hunter. You know, lock in with people who are actually leaders and know what the fuck they're talking about. You know, like that's important. And let's not act like it isn't. So that's some of the things you can do in terms of action steps up to here.
Yeah, I know you asked for one. I got three. One is there was like a beautiful family that was over here, and I was like, pass me that baby. One of my favorite things when I worked for still my president, Barack Hussein Obama, was to do presentations like this with actual babies. And connected to that, if you are in relationship with young children, read with them. Talk to them about what you've experienced here today. In an era where they're literally banning and burning books. That's and right. Trying to convince people who are truth tellers to not tell the truth. It's important for us to be keepers of that truth and to start with babies, building the literacy. The second is to extend that and to tell this story of what you experience here with other people. Right. And I would challenge you, talking to or having a conversation with the congregation is important, but I would challenge you to have this conversation with somebody who's not receptive to it initially. Find a way to do the difficult work of engaging and building with somebody who needs to be in this space and doesn't understand the importance of it yet. And leverage the resources that exist in these books and the people around you, the music, the sociologists, all of it, to make that happen, right? To make that happen. The third thing is, if you can, join us in DC for Equity Week. NBJC is really proud to host. This will be the second year of Equity Week. Equity is important because equality is not enough. That's right. Especially in this context. And so June 10th through the 14th, we will host a series of events. We'll have Out on the Hill, which will allow for conversations like this with elected officials. We'll revisit some of the bills that Dreesen and Dr. Hunter reintroduced on the Hill 2 weeks ago. We have Space for Joy at Thirst Lounge, was the only Black queer-owned space for us in DC. We'll host a ball, not black tie, Jack and Jill, 100 Black Men ball, but Vogue the House Down Boots ball at the historic Howard Theater on Friday, June 13th. And then on the 14th, we'll have a reflection activity that will honor Brother Bayard Rustin. You can learn about all of that at nbjc.org, or if you want to talk to me about it, we would love to host you in DC for Equity Week. Excellent.
I feel humbled being on the stage with these two giants. So, as a reminder, National Black Justice Coalition, you can follow them. Collective, I'm sorry.
Don't be, that's all right. nbjc.org or NBJC on the move across digital platforms.
And Black Music Action Coalition, where can you be found?
BMAcoalition.org. IG is BMA_coalition. Or just Google it. We there. We out there in the streets for real.
I want to take a minute to thank Dr. Tiffany Crutcher.
That's right.
Wait, but before we finish, how can people support and find you and your work?
Right.
Well, you can go to the blackwallstreettimes.com.
And then they don't just say so cavalier either, you know. Yeah, man, you know.
You can find me at blackwallstreettimes.com. My email is dion@bwstimes.com. I run a podcast, In Depth with Dion. You can find me on Spotify, Apple, all the things. So.
And when you say Dr. Crutcher, you know, and this Legacy Fest, I think it's really important that we give it up for her and what she's doing and the team and what she's building, her team. You know, when I got off the plane, I seen cars with Legacy Fest picking people up. You know, when I came into the hotel, I'm seeing the cops blocking the streets off, and this came out of pain, but as often as we do, we take that pain and create this
Alchemist,
level
that's
of
right.
joy.
That's right.
And I can't wait to be able to get in these streets today and feel the energy, feel the excitement, and the fact that she has not allowed us to forget this, especially right now, in a time where there is a federal mandate to try and erase the history of our people their people. To have a moment like this weekend, as we approach Black Music Month, as we approach Juneteenth, I think is no other way for us to usher this time in. So once again, make some noise for her.
Before we wrap up this last amazing panel, and y'all, enjoy the afternoon. We're gonna open up to a few questions. Anybody have any questions? Oh, we got a couple.
Yeah, shout out to y'all. I'm so glad it worked out like this because, as Robert was saying, we've been in planet space, but not public facing space. This is we in the C-suite. So as we're in the C-suite, something I didn't mention earlier in the introduction for Prophet and also for Dr. David is the legislative component to what you all do. So I just wanted to open up the space to allow you all to share some of the legislation that you're doing, especially when you say about that action. And I think a lot of people don't have an awareness or wouldn't know that there are organizations that are not just activating, but also generating policies and laws. So if y'all could just share.
In 2021, it came to our attention that there were over 800 cases where Black men were indicted and serving time with just lyrics used as evidence. So BMAC led the working group to create the federal legislation called the Restoring Artistic Protection Act, the RAP Act. And we partnered with Congressman Hank Johnson and then Congressman Jamal Bowman to introduce that bill. It was a federal bill. This is before Young Thug was arrested, before any of that took place. But quickly we realized, even in that case, that lyrics were what they were using to prosecute, not evidence. Shout out to Governor Newsom. California was the first state to sign a piece of legislation that came from our federal bill to prohibit the use of lyrics. And we have
not too much on Gavin. Not too much on Gavin.
But you were able to get that done, though.
Well, what we will do, we have to give
You're right.
Give him a shout out for that piece of legislation.
That was before the switch up.
And we have bills in New York, Missouri, Maryland, all around that. And we were able to bring the Recording Academy, SAG-AFTRA, all of the advocacy groups together around that bill. Dr. Marcus Dreesen organized a summit a couple weeks ago with Cory Booker, in which Hank Johnson, Congressman Johnson, spoke about the reintroduction of that bill. So that's a piece of legislation we're extremely proud of. Also, the No Fakes Act. It's a bipartisan bill. It's the first piece of legislation to deal with deep fakes and clones around AI. As you know, AI is inevitable, it's happening, it's here. ChatGPT, it is what it is. But if there aren't guardrails around this technology, artists, and particularly Black artists, will once again be robbed of their intellectual property. So the No Fakes Act is something I'm very proud of because it was a Republican and Democratic piece of legislation that was introduced a month ago. And there's a great chance of us getting that passed. So those are just two pieces of legislation that we worked on as an organization.
Yeah, I won't spend a lot of time here, but I just want to double tap on coalition. As a son of California, I was not being funny and not too much on Gavin. That happened before the switch up, and we need to be clear about the importance of holding elected leaders at every level accountable, including for being consistent. But the credit goes to the coalitions that made that happen and compelled the governor to do what the governor should do, which is act on behalf of the people that put him in office, right? And so I just want to underscore that and say thank you to Dreesen who has been masterful at holding the body of legislation that is under what MBJC refers to as our equity suite of bills. These two are fundamental components of that. What I know as an unapologetic member of the Black Women's Club, the Mama's Boys Club, is that we wouldn't have most of the beautiful things that we have in the world if it were not for Black women. Right. And that it should not be lost on anyone that most of the elected leaders at the federal level holding reparations bills are Black women.
That's right.
It is Ayanna Pressley, it is Summer Lee. I want to still shout out our forever Congresswoman Cori Bush, who is paying the toll of the Black tax that so many other leaders are still working through. Who, Tiffany? Oh, Tiffany Crutcher, very much so.
Yeah.
That's again to honor the way in which we all show up, but you can all can go to MBJC's Action Hub to find more information about not only each piece of legislation, but how you can engage your elected leaders in advancing it.
And I will say this, was it 525 or 35 people?
Members?
535.
Yeah.
Make the laws for all 300 million Americans in global policy. I'm sure between me and David, there's 500 people in our phone that we can call right now. That is a small amount of people that are making laws for this entire country with global implications. We have to be involved with the political process. There's no way around that. If we don't change policy, nothing changes, and that's real.
And at the risk of being persnickety, I definitely want to hear your questions, sis. I don't want to know that. I spent nearly a decade on Capitol Hill. I started in the House of Representatives. I worked for Congressman Charles Rangel, who became an ancestor last week, one of the founding members of the Congressional Black Caucus, the conscience of the Congress, and then worked for the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions for nearly a decade. That's the committee that sees more than 40% of legislation introduced in any given Congress. My boss was Senator Kennedy, rest in peace. I'm the one that wrote those laws. I wrote those laws. So I want to be clear. That it is appropriate for us to honor and celebrate the work of elected leaders, but it is staffers. It is staffers who write those laws. And so if anybody has not told you that you have the right, the obligation to walk into any elected official's office and demand for them to do the people's business, that is your right. I hope you use it.
First, I wanted to thank you all so much for coming and taking the time out to talk to us today. My name is Sasha Wilson. I'm a senior mass communication major attending Grambling State University.
Come on.
You sound like a Black.
She does.
You sound like a
HBCU.
Shout out to you.
You need to go into the White House pool and teach them how to do their job.
Last summer with the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and Late Representative Sheila Jackson.
Come on.
My question for you all today is, what advice would you give young Black leaders such as myself to help us play a part in amplifying restorative justice during a time when the president is actively trying to hurt us, silence our voices, and tear down the progress our ancestors fought so hard? Get it, Sasha. I'm so proud of you.
Sasha, my advice for you is to keep your foot on these people's neck.
That's right.
I don't have an answer that you need. What I know based on how you phrase that and the spirit in which you move through this space, that you have everything required to continue standing on business. In the moments in which you are the lonely only, when it feels like you are crazy because everybody around you is saying something that you know is not right or righteous, my prayer is that you hold on to a sermon that Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s the third gave to me when I said, how do you make sense of what feels like sacrificing your father for not? I asked him this during the occupant's first term, when I was no longer able to stay in the role of leading the White House Initiative on Educational Excellence for African Americans. My way of serving our country, working under the leadership of still my president, Barack Hussein Obama, his fabulous wife, Michelle Obama Robinson Obama, Sasha Malia, Grandma Robinson, Sonny and Bo too. The sermon he gave me is titled, But If Not. It's a sermon that MLK preached at Ebenezer Baptist Church in '63. And it tells the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and if you're Black, a bad Negro. If you're not, it's a big no-go. Inside jokes. Ask your Black friends, Black Baptist friends. But the point here is that these three young men who are younger than you at the time were met with somebody who showed up like the occupant or the felt history teacher turned governor of Florida, who said to them, if you don't bow at the foot of this statue, then I'm going to commit you to a fiery pit of hell. Dr. King talks about the importance of us having the kind of conviction that we do what's right because we know it's right. What he says is that those boys had the kind of faith that said, I'm going to stand on business, believing that my Lord will save me from this wrath, and even if he doesn't, but if not, I'm okay doing it because I know that I'm supposed to do it.
Right.
And far too often, we have a kind of conditional faith that says, I will do it if you do this for me first. One of the most powerful things of this sermon, and I think he was 33 at the time he delivered it, was that he said that each of us will be confronted with a moment where our convictions are going to be tested, where we'll feel easiest to say, I don't want to do it because I don't want to lose my job. I don't want people to look at me crazy. I don't want my house to be bombed. I don't want my neighborhood to be destroyed. And he says that if you were met at that moment when you were 17, but you lived to 98, you might as well have died at 17.
Right.
Because you missed doing that which you are uniquely purposed to do. And so my reminder to you is to honor that which you are uniquely purposed to do.
That's right.
Be willing to stand on that, knowing that you will be delivered from whatever the challenge will be, and to hold on to the but if not faith.
Okay, I just wanted to say thank you for the NABJ shout out. I am the recruitment chair for NABJ Tulsa. So if anyone's interested in joining, we're having a recruitment happy hour Saturday, June 14th. It's actually right here on Greenwood at the Greenwood Beach radio station. But since you guys are such not so knowledgeable of history, I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite historical anecdote that pushes you today and kind of mirrors the action that you're doing in historical justice?
Historical anecdote.
I mean, I kind of have something.
Go for it, come on.
For me, like, I think of it as like my North Star, and it's Ida B. Wells Barnett. When I read the Red Record, which was the first documented accounting, just unabashed truth of the lynchings taking place in this country, and all the work that she did as a journalist, her Memphis office being bombed, continuing to do the work, going overseas to Europe to try and get them to stop trading with the U.S. and until they, to pressure them to end the Jim Crow laws. She's my North Star because at the end of the day, the only way to right wrongs is to turn the light of truth upon them. And that's her quote, and that's what that I keep with me, and that's what informs my work and everything I do. So.
Karita talked about Marie Johns. I'll go back to Marsha Pay No Mind Johnson. So it's Marsha Johnson, the P is for Pay No Mind. When people would ask, who are you and who do you love? She said, pay no mind. We would not have Pride Month if it were not for Marsha P. Johnson. This is a Black woman at the time. They were called streetwalkers. There was another term that I will never use that they were called, but she, at the age of 14, was in Times Square, hustling for money, trying to build community for trans and gender expansive people. She is someone who literally used cobblestones from a place, Stonewall, which was an inn. It was a bar. It was a place at that time in New York City that was both a site of refuge and a site of tremendous trauma for queer folks, in part because New York City had laws that said you had to have on 3 articles of clothing that were consistent with the gender that was assigned to you at birth. There were laws that said that a shop owner at a place like this could deny or discriminate against you because there was a belief at the time that queer people couldn't handle their liquor. Oh, the lies they tell. And so Marsha P. Johnson literally used stones from this place to lay the foundation for what we now know as the liberation movements for trans, queer, and gender expansive people. And one of the things that vexes me most is that in this moment, June for most people is often thought of as pride parades centering skinny white boys in glitter and rainbow. It is a space where pride pimping corporations signal to us because they put up rainbows in their windows and say, now's the time for y'all to know that we care about you, only to rip that shit down on the very last day of the month. And what I know is that Marsha was about that action. Marsha started an organization called STAR to provide space for kids that were castigated out to no fault of their own to ask for access to resources, to housing, to healthcare, to deal with trauma. At that time, if you were arrested as a queer, trans, or gender expansive person, you didn't just go to jail, you could have been locked up in a mental facility and shot up with drugs, right? And so it's really important for us to celebrate the legacies of people who encourage us to get closer to freedom, but also provide us with lessons to endure along the way. For folks who missed the openings for the 2 previous plenaries, they were both framed by advocates from Tulsa Center for Mental Health. What I know is that the suicide rate for Black youth doubled in the last 2 decades before the most recent pandemic inspired by coronavirus. Doubled. These are children who, again, didn't consent to these politics, who are saying, I want out of this. If we don't find ways to also honor that Marsha said we need to be well, so I know a lot of us will take our stuff to church on Sunday. My hope is that you also take your stuff to a certified therapist, a good therapist who will help you do work outside of sessions such that we can get closer to freedom in the way that Marsha wanted us to.
An ancestor by the name of Debbie Stiggins, my mother, who made her transition at 39 years old, taught me a very serious lesson, probably when I was about 12. And I use this in most of my talks, that there's 2 types of people in this world, thermometers and thermostats. The thermometer go up and down depending on the climate in the room, but the thermostat's job is to set the climate in the room. Remind yourself to always be a thermostat. So I try and carry that with me. I've carried it to my children, and I will carry it to my grandchild. I just became a grandfather a week ago. And that's what I felt from this sister Sasha. You know, I felt you walking in that sort of, with that thermostatic energy, that confidence, that belief in yourself. That's key. And so that's what I can add to the antidote question of what I hold. I hold that deeply in my heart, and I try and move with that in every room I'm in.
I don't know if we have any more questions. They're telling me we gotta wrap it up. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this. Thank you for bringing that energy that we need to have this conversation with y'all.
Yeah, thank you.
And one more time, let's give it up for Dr. Tiffany Crutcher and Karen. Thank you so much.